Hey, Pastor Kyle here. I just want to thank you for clicking and checking out this resource. Hey, do me a favor, if you want to keep updated with all of our live videos, Sunday morning live streams, or any other video, just click the subscribe button so you'll get notified when we go live each week. Also, if you would like to give or find out more about the ministry at Crossview Church, you can check out some of the links below the video and click there to learn more. Well, I pray that this video and this lesson be a blessing to you. I pray for your week, and may God bless you and keep you.
Well, let me start by just apologizing to you. If you've stood within 6 feet of me this morning and noticed that I smell like a York peppermint patty, it's because I'm doing everything I can to keep from coughing. The good news is you get to hear Barry White preach this morning. So there's that. I don't know if I'll be able to pull that off at Christmas time. We'll see. 2,000 years ago, a man was born, and he would be called the Son of God. He would be called the Exalted One. In fact, he would be remembered throughout history. People would remember his name and who he was and what he did. In fact, people worshiped him near and far. Even more than that, he actually brought peace into a violent world. Of course, the person I'm talking about is Caesar Augustus. Caesar Augustus was one of the earliest Roman emperors. In fact, he was called all those things. He was called a son of God. He was a false son of God. And he was called an exalted one, although we know that he wasn't truly an exalted one. But what he did as the leader of Rome, just before the turning of the millennia, before Christ was born, about 60 years before Jesus' birth, Caesar Augustus took power and brought a sense of peace and stability to the Roman Empire that was unusual in the ancient world. They called this peaceful time period, which lasted about 200 years, they called it the Pax Romana, or another word of just saying the Roman peace. And what happened in that time of peace was not necessarily a true peace. It's that he established military force and power. He socialized protections for certain classes of people. They built roads, they rebuilt cities, they took control of towns, and because of all these things that were happening, he also destroyed his enemies within Rome, defeating other people who tried to lay claim to his position and title. And when he did all this, he accomplished something that no one else had really thought was possible, which is to establish a kind of peace and stability throughout the entirety of the Roman Empire. For the ancient world, that was something incredible. But it was only a facade of peace. Because always the undercurrent bubbling underneath of this was claims for power, there were border disputes, there were enemies rising up, there was oppression underneath Roman control and rule. And the Jewish people especially felt that kind of oppression as Rome took over Jerusalem and dominated with power. So Caesar Augustus, a man who was known for bringing peace to the world, really only brought the picture of peace that he thought was right, a kind of peace that really wasn't a lasting peace. In fact, it wasn't really true peace at all. But there was another man. Maybe you've heard of him. There was another man that the Jews knew of, who had been prophesied to come. In fact, this man would be born and he would be called a prince of peace. In Isaiah chapter 9, we read that before we began this morning. He would be called many things, but a prince of peace he would be called. And he would establish a lasting peace. Not like the Roman peace, which was just a facade and the constant civil wars erupting and bubbling underneath. No, this king would bring about a kind of peace that we had never seen before, a kind of peace that would last forever. It would be a reign of peace, and it would be all over the entirety of the world. And conflict and war and violence would be ended because of this king, who would be the Prince of Peace, would come into the world. What we're going to look at today in Luke chapter 2 is a picture of the angels singing of this coming king. And as they stand in a field singing to the shepherds, in Luke chapter 2, verse 14, they sing this phrase, "Glory to God in the highest heaven." And here it is, "Peace on earth to people he favors." But if you're like me, you might look around and think, they proclaimed that peace on earth had arrived, that it was coming in this one who was born, the Messiah who was born, the Prince of Peace. And yet in the last 2,000 years, I think our world has seen anything but peacefulness. Did the angels get something wrong here? Was there something wrong with the prophecies? They said peace would come with the Messiah, and yet what we've seen in the past couple thousand years doesn't mirror any kind of real, true, lasting peace, does it? In fact, we might even think the peace that we have still seems like a facade of peace. Maybe here in the United States we have a sense of peacefulness because we are not afraid that our neighbors are going to attack us and destroy us, but underneath that there still bubbles a sense of foreboding doom as we look into world events and we think, is it only a matter of time before the peaceful lives we live here in Northeast Indiana are disrupted and interrupted by the warmongering and the fights and the global conflicts that have just seemed to plague every empire in the world throughout history? Because Jesus didn't do the things that the Jews expected him to do. He didn't come and free them from Roman control. He didn't establish a military force. He didn't destroy the Jewish enemies. But he did come and bring peace. He brought us a different kind of peace. Maybe a peace that we didn't even know that we needed. A peace that we didn't recognize. In fact, when Jesus came, the Prince of Peace, he brought us a peace that extends beyond anything we could have possibly really imagined or hoped for. He brought us peace with God. Now, at the surface level, all of the good Christians just nodded their head and say, yes, he brought us peace with God. But all of you who may be wondering, but now wait a minute, why can't he bring us peace on earth? Why can't he end all the conflicts? You might even be asking yourself, how is peace with God better than peace on earth? How is that a better kind of peace? When I have discussions with friends and family who don't understand this kind of peace, or maybe they're struggling with doubts about if this faith is even true, maybe this morning you're struggling with doubts about if this faith is even true. You might be wondering this exact question. Why wouldn't God, if he's so good and so loving, and if he's not the Prince of Peace, why wouldn't he establish peace in the way that we can see it physically? Now, I'm often sarcastic to a fault, and I like to be facetious with these things. And so my wife is laughing at me. When I have friends in direct conversation say, I just don't understand. Why doesn't God just end all the wars and end all the violence in the world? And I say, yeah, that's right. Why doesn't he? They're like, yeah, a good God would. And I'm like, a good God would. You know what a good God would do is he would just like round up all the good people and like put them in a boat and then like wipe out the rest of the world, right? And then they're like, yeah, wait a minute. I see what you did there. Don't you see that there's a problem with that line of thinking? Because what people really are asking is, why doesn't God rule the world in peace according to my view of peace? You see, if God were to just wipe out all of the wickedness and all of the sin in the world with the snap of a finger, many of us wouldn't have much of a prayer, if not for the Lord who came and gave us peace with God. Our friends who demand that we have peace on earth and God just wipe out all evil, they have to know what they're asking for. What they're asking for is every time someone commits a sin, God just takes them out. We know that doesn't work. We know that, in fact, God has followed a program in the past where he has had to start from scratch, because literally all of the thoughts of mankind were evil all the time, and God said, I've got to start this thing over again. I've got to recreate things, and I've got to start with another small group of people and rebuild everything again. A new creation, if you will. Because we are human, and because of our sinfulness, because of the way that we are, even if God did somehow miraculously, which God could do anything, even if he did just end all of the wars on earth immediately, just ended them all. Somehow there was a miraculous ceasefire agreement that was agreed upon, and all of the wars all around the world, all of the genocides, all ended all at once. We'd still find a way to mess it up. If it's not war, it's crime. If it's not crime, then we'd find it in politics. If we don't find the conflict in politics, it's in our work, in our jobs and careers, in our marriages, with our friendships, the economy. As humans, our sinfulness would go bonkers. We could create all kinds of chaos. We don't need wars to create chaos. We do it all on our own. We do it all on our own. And because of it, we live in constant senses of fear, anxiety, worry, doubt. You see, God could end all of the world's wars right now, in this moment. He could. And yet you would still struggle to find peace in your heart, in your thoughts, in the way that you live, in the way that you interact with other people. Your mind, 1,000 combinations of ways we could come up with to lose peace in our lives. So Jesus came into the world, the Prince of Peace, to bring us a different kind of peace. A kind of peace that we can't reverse engineer. And we've tried. We have tried. Go to Barnes & Noble and go to the self-help section and just look at all of the books. Thousands and thousands of pages, millions of words have been written, TED Talks have been delivered, Oprah had a show about how to become happy, how to be at peace, how to remove anxiety and worry and develop this sense of wholeness in your life and in your heart and purpose and all these other jargon terms that we've come up with to describe what it is that we really lack, which is to have peace with our Creator, to have peace with the only one who can truly give us a real sense of peace. It's the peace with God that we need. But just like we always do, we want to first go all the 16 different ways to get the wrong thing before we finally say, you know what, I've tried, and I've read all these books, but for some reason, I always come back to this simple fact that I just can't find peace in my life. My heart is still burdened with anxiety and fear and worry and doubt and depression. Have you ever seen someone in the midst of an emergency who just doesn't lose their wits? You know, in the fire department, we used to have kind of a saying. I mean, I think this actually may be more of a military thing, but we would say something like this. You know, when you get sent somewhere dangerous and things hit the fan, if you will, pardon the language, you don't look around for the person that's losing their mind. When stuff starts to go down that's bad, you look around and you try to find the person who looks like, okay, that guy's, he's calm. He's looking around, he's thinking, but he's subdued and he's ready to go. And then you kind of drift over to that person and sit behind them and say like, okay, I don't know what's happening right now, but I know that it feels like the world is crashing and all these things are going wrong, but you seem to be calm. You seem to you have something about you that's different, so I'm going to follow you. Where are you going? I'm going to go where you go. That sense of calm, that sense of peacefulness, that's the kind of peace that Jesus can give us. That's the kind of peace that the Prince of Peace delivers to us in our hearts and our minds when we're made right with God. In fact, it's a kind of peace that points to the peace giver. Because if all of the world is crumbling around us, but yet here I am looking like I'm okay and it's all going to be all right because I know God's got me. And when my friends come and say, how are you just staying so calm? Everything's going wrong. And I can say, well, because I know that no matter what happens in this world, I have eternity. It just always reminds me of the stories of Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego. Do you remember this in the book of Daniel where they stand in the fiery furnace and they say something to the effect of, look, our God could save us, but even if he doesn't, we'll still worship him. That's something special. That's a kind of peace that we can't figure out on our own. That kind of peacefulness, to be able to stand in the midst of a fire, in the midst of a blaze, in the midst of this world that feels like there's conflict and war and strife and things could crumble at any moment, the ability to stand with composure and calmness and sensibility, that's a kind of peace that we cannot manufacture on our own. I'm trying to get you to see this is the kind of peace that Jesus brings. This is the kind of peace that the Prince of Peace delivers to our hearts and to our minds. Let me give you a definition of what I think this is. This is what I came up with this week. Peace is not the absence of all the conflict in the world. Peace is not the absence of war. It's not the absence of difficulty. It's not the absence of problems. Here's what I think peace is, the kind of peace that we can have through Christ. It's the inexplicable sense of calm that comes through a restored relationship with God and the knowledge of his everlasting love and care for you. Let me read that again. This is what I think peace is. I have biblical reason to think this is what peace is. This is what I think is described in the New Testament. It is the inexplicable sense of calm that comes through a restored relationship with God and the knowledge of his everlasting love and care for you. That's the kind of peace that I think we all want to have in our lives. That kind of peace that we can wake up in the morning and we can face the day, and whatever comes our way, we can work through it because we have a sense of inexplicable calm. Paul might say you have a peace that surpasses all understanding because of your trust in Christ, who will guard your heart and your mind. This is the kind of peace we want. Now, the angels, when they declared peace in that field to the shepherds, in verse 14, it says it right there, and I think we pass by this in hopes that what he really means when he declares this kind of peace is that it's going to be peace from war and strife. But he says clearly, peace on earth to people he favors. The angel doesn't declare peace on earth from all war. He doesn't declare peace on earth from all of the problems. He doesn't say we're going to turn down the fiery furnace to a hot tub temperature. It's going to be comfortable now. He says peace on earth to people he favors. And so our first, and friends, this is maybe the most important question we need to ask in our lives. Who are the people he favors? Who are those people? Because if I want peace, I need to be one of those people. How do I become one of those people whom he favors? And the beautiful thing about the New Testament is it doesn't keep secret from us the things that God wants us to know in order to be drawn into a relationship with him. He tells us plainly, the people whom God favors are those who put their faith in his Son. The ones who put their faith and trust and hope in Jesus Christ, these are the ones whom he favors. These are the ones whom he adopts into his family and cares for them as his own children. He brings them in. He draws them in. He restores them. He gives them hope and a future. And he gives them life. And he gives them peace because they're his. When we put our faith in Christ, this is what God delivers to us. The reason we can have peace is because we are with him. It's an incredible transaction that happens, that the Son gives his life in order that we can have life. And all we have to do is trust. Now, if you're struggling with peace this morning, you need to hear this. This is the bottom line. This is what you need to hear. If you feel like, I don't have peace in my heart, I don't have peace in my mind, you need to hear this. You cannot experience the peace of God until you have peace with God. You can't have or experience the peace of God until you have peace with God. That's what we have to have first. And you're desperate for it. You may not even realize you're desperate for it, but you're desperate for peace with God. Because we were created to be in relationship with him, to glorify him, to point to him, to look to him. And yet here we are, struggling with our past trauma, struggling with anxiety, struggling with the sins and the brokenness of our lives. We're running from God. And that's often what we do when we're in the dark. John 3:19 says that the light came into the world, but those who were in the darkness tried to hide from the light. Now, just as a thought here, let's consider this. The only way we can have peace with God is to go through Jesus Christ, achieve peace with God through Jesus Christ, through his forgiveness, through what he provides, but because of our desire to keep the sinful parts of our lives hidden from sight, we don't actually hand everything to him. We hold on to it. We hide in the dark shadow because we don't want to expose our lives to anyone or anything. We don't want God to see, like God can't see. We don't want God to see the darkness of my thought life. We don't want God to see the darkness of the things that I did in secret. So we try to hide it from him as if we could. And we create this barrier between us and God that need not be there. Because when he brings light into the world, when he brings peace into our relationship with him, we don't have to hide anything from him. We can hand it all over. We can lay it all before him because he knows it all. You see, there's two sides to this peace coin. Two sides. You really got to understand both. The first side is judicial, a judicial side. In Romans 5:1, the Apostle Paul tells us, therefore, since we have been justified by faith, we have peace with God through our Lord Jesus Christ. Let me break this down into maybe non-theology terms. He says, since we have been justified by faith, which is just another way of saying, since Christ has paid the penalty of our sins and has made us right with God, we've been justified. We place our faith in Christ. He makes us right with God. This is us being justified. This happens through our act of faith. This isn't something that we work up to. This isn't something that we have to build ourselves into. We don't have to become better people to be right with God. We'll become better people when we're right with God. Jesus pays the price. We accept the benefit of having faith in him, which is being made right with our Creator. It's a judicial action. God the Father says, the gavel is slammed. You are right with me. You are mine. Because you have trusted my Son, you're mine. You're justified. End of story. But we all know there's another half to that coin. Because you can be justified with God, but the other side of the coin is to have experiential peace with him. Experiential peace. And I think it's described best in Philippians 4:6-7. This is one of my favorite verses. I know this is one of your, maybe many of you, one of your favorite verses as well. Because it tells us, look, don't worry about anything. But in everything, through prayer and petition, with thanksgiving, present your requests to God. And the peace of God, which surpasses all understanding, will guard your hearts and your minds in Christ Jesus. This is experiential. On the one side of the coin, we have judicial. We are established to be right with God. On the other side of the coin, we experience the fruit of that peace in our lives. Peace, if you will, is a fruit of the Spirit. love, joy, peace, patience, kindness, goodness, and on. Here's what I think many people struggle with. You can have the first one and not have the second one. Let me say it this way. You can have justification with God. You can be made right with God and yet never fully experience the sense of peace that he promises to you. And you're craving it. Well, God has not abandoned you if you feel weary or scared. He's not abandoning you if you feel doubt or worry or any of these things. God has not abandoned you, but you need to know something. You have to understand the truth about that first side of the coin in order to experience the true nature of the sensation of peace in your life and in your heart. He promises us the peace will guard your heart and your mind in Christ Jesus. Let me put it through an illustration. I have a dog named Lucy. I'm a dog person, and many of you know this. I love my dog. She's a good dog. But she's so timid. And she's just a little pipsqueak, right? So when I come home, if she's kind of excited and going nuts, it's like she's so excited to see me. So I'm walking over to say hi to her, or I'm going to go pet her, and she does this weird thing where she like crawls around really low on the ground, like I'm going to hurt her, and then rolls over on her back and like puts her paws in the air. Does anybody else's dog do this? It's almost like she's terrified that I'm going to do something to harm her. How many of you approach your relationship with God that way? Let me explain. How many of you know God is my Father? I've been made right by faith through Jesus Christ. I've been made well and restored in my relationship to God because of what Jesus did, not because of what I did, but because of what he did. And because I trust in him, I know because the word tells me I can have peace with God because of Jesus Christ. I know it, but yet when I go before the Lord, rather than approaching confidently like he's my Father, I go into the throne room of grace before God and I cower in the corner, and then I lay on my back in fear and trembling as if he's going to harm me. And the sense of peace which God's trying to give us that guards our hearts and our minds is lost in our desire to be not seen, or to keep our anxieties to ourselves, or our fears or our worries, and they're all without foundation. When we brought this dog into our home, I had adopted her into our family. I'm not going to hurt her. She's mine. She's family. You guys know how that works, right? Dogs are family. I could have made this about my children, but I went with the dog instead. When you are given peace with God, the peace that comes from the Prince of Peace, you can experience the peace of God, but you have to remember that you're right with God. As we can qualify this 1,000 different ways. It doesn't mean you can just go do whatever you want, because that will destroy your peace with God. To live a life of foolishness and sinfulness, that will destroy your peace with God because you're actively being disobedient to the God who loves you. That will destroy your peace with your Father in heaven. But my friends, if we humble ourselves, we look at what Christ has done for us, we receive forgiveness, we have a right relationship with God, we can turn to him and trust that even though I've messed things up, I can have a sense of peace and hope and life and love because of him. Now, I'm convinced that one of the reasons why we so often don't experience the peace of God is because we forget the peace of God that we have. And we need to remind ourselves. So this morning, as we wrap this up, we're going to celebrate new life and new peace with God. But I want to invite you to say something with me. I want to invite you, first of all, if you have not yet committed your life to Jesus, if you haven't made peace with God through the Son of God who offers it to you, there is no better time than now. Why would you wait? I put it this way. What reason would you have for not turning to Christ by faith this morning and saying, I'm a sinner in need of a Savior, in need of peace with God, so that I can have peace in my heart. Because that's available to you. For those of you who have been saved, who are walking in faith, you've been justified, you've been made right with God. Because you've been made right with him, you have peace with God, but yet you're struggling to experience that peace with God this morning, the peace that surpasses all understanding, the inexplicable sense of calm that comes from a restored relationship with God, and the everlasting love and compassion and care that he has for you. I want you to repeat this with me. Here's the first thing. I want you to say this. I'm going to say it, and then I want you to say it, okay? I'm going to go, then you go. All right, no one said anything. Everybody got it. All right, we're all good. Everybody give me thumbs up if you got it. This is the instructions. All right, rock on. All right, here we go. I have been forgiven. I have been restored. Now we're going to do it one more time, and this time we're going to do it with feeling. If you are here this morning and you have been made right with Christ, you have been made right with God through the Prince of Peace who came into the world to bring peace to those whom God favors, and you have stepped in faithfully to follow Christ, and you've repented, and you've turned to him, and you've offered him your whole life, you can repeat with me these two things. And when you leave here today, you can repeat them to yourself as many times as you need in order to remember the love and care that God has for you. I have been forgiven. I have been restored. One last thing. Praise Jesus. Let's pray. God, this morning, thank you for letting me speak for a whole 25 minutes without losing my voice. Lord, I pray for anybody else who's just feeling the ickiness of colds and sickness this time of year. I know many are dealing with it or have dealt with it, and we pray for full recovery. God, I also just pray this morning that you would fill our hearts with a sense of peace, that peace that you describe as surpassing all understanding. God, that's the peace we desperately want in our lives, and we know that that is the true peace that we really need to have peace with you, our Father and our Creator, the one who loves us and draws us and gives us life. God, I pray that you help us to put things before you, and that you would shine a light on the areas of our lives where we need to hand over to you, even if it's scary to us, God, to step into the light and let things be seen and be known by you. We can know that you truly love us because you already knew all of the things that we would do and all of the things that we would mess up before you even sent your Son to rescue us. You already knew them. And so, God, we come before you trusting in the love and care of your word and the promises of your Son who loved us and who gave his life for us, God. I pray that you strengthen us in these things this week, and help us to be lights that shine forth and teach people about the peace that we can have through you and through your Son who came, who is our Prince of Peace in this difficult world. God, we thank you and we love you and we praise you this Christmas season. In Jesus' mighty name, amen.